Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes, for a bottle.
Okay. We have already started this lesson from last week. So we are in the section dealing with translation. Okay. Okay, I've gotten the wrong PowerPoint on the screen.
Okay, sir.
So I'm going to be going back to the original lesson. So I'm going back. I'm coming. I was wondering what this was about. Okay. All right, we're going to start right here. Number 13. This is where we're to begin today in our translation. What we're doing in this exercise is to practice the use of the definite article with different nouns before we get into our new lesson. For the sake of time, I will just go ahead and do the translation myself. Okay, this is atama, which means ground. This is we, which is a conjunction meaning and this is afar, which is a noun meaning dust. So the translation is ground, and dust. Then we have the same nouns used with the definite article. Here we have the definite article consisting of the consonant he and the long vowel kames, which is ha. This is a vertical stroke. It is a pause called metheg, literally translated as bridle. That means that after we say ha, we pause for a second before we pronounce the rest of the noun, or before we pronounce the noun itself, which is athama. So this is ha, athama. This is a composite schwa. We call it a hatef pathak, a horrid pathak, a horrid a, because the tendency is to hurry to the last syllable where the accent is usually placed. It's placed there so often that the symbol of the accent, the arrowhead, is not put over the last syllable. The arrowhead is put over a syllable when it is not the last syllable. So this is ha, athama, the ground. And this is we, which is and this is he. This is another form of the definite article. Let me explain the difference. Normally, the definite article is a he followed by the short vowel pathak, and it is pronounced ha. But when the definite article comes before a noun that begins with a guttural letter, such as aleph, it cannot be doubled. Normally, the first letter of a noun should be doubled. And because it can't be doubled, aleph is a guttural and can't take a dagesh forte, and therefore cannot be doubled. To compensate for the lack of doubling the first letter of the noun, the pathak has to be lengthened to its corresponding long vowel. So the short a in pathak is lengthened to the long a in kames. That is why we have kames here instead of pathak. Now, in the case of this definite article, it doesn't have the kames as we might expect. This is another guttural letter, which is at the beginning of this noun. And there is a grammatical rule that says that when the definite article comes before a noun that starts with ayin, then the vowel that is under the he of the definite article should be segol. So this is he, and again you have the metheg, the bridle, to slow us down from going right into the noun. So we pause, he, afar. And this is translated the dust. So the translation of ha, athama, we, he, afar is the ground and the dust. This was just ground and dust, but with the definite article, we have the ground and the dust. Number 14, we have ear, we, hekal. Ear means city, we is and hekal may be translated either as temple or palace, depending on the context in which it is used. In this kind of exercise, it is not possible to know what context hekal is being used because I don't have it in a story. I don't have it in a chapter. I just have it just like this by itself without any context. So either translation would be all right. So ear is city, we is and, hekal is a noun meaning either temple or palace. So it would be translated city and palace or city and temple. Then we have these same nouns used with the definite article. We have ha'ir, and the reason why we have the commas here instead of the segol, you notice that both of them come before a word that begins with ayin. The difference is this. In afar, the accent is not on the ayin. The accent is not on the syllable. The accent is on the last syllable, far. So the rule says that when the definite article comes before an unaccented ayin, then it should have the vowel segol. But if it comes before a syllable that has the accent and ayin is at the beginning of that syllable, and all of this is just one syllable, ear. So the accent is over this syllable. The rule says that when the accent comes over ayin at the beginning of the noun, then the vowel should be under, the vowel under the hey should be a commas. Okay, it should be lengthened to a commas. So that's the difference why you find that this has segol, this ayin is unaccented. And why this has a commas, because this syllable, which includes the ayin, is accented. The last syllable is usually the syllable accented. And when a word only has one syllable, then it is counted as the last syllable. So we find that the ayin is accented. We ha hekal. Now notice that there is a pathak under the definite article, and yet this is a guttural letter. According to another grammatical rule governing the vowels that are under the definite article, it says that when the definite article comes before a word that begins with the guttural letter hey, then because this is a harsh guttural, there is no need to lengthen the vowel from pathak to commas. This is considered a soft guttural, so there is a need to lengthen the pathak to commas. But when it comes to the hey, this is considered a coarse or rough guttural, and therefore there is no need to compensate for not having a dagesh in here, dagesh forte. There's no need to put any compensation here by lengthening pathak to commas. So it's ha hekal, that is the temple. So ha'ir is the city, we ha hekal is and the palace, or and the temple. Now here we have the longest sentence so far in this exercise. Number 15, bara Elohim atham min ha-athama. Remember that ordinarily a verb comes before a noun in the Hebrew language. And so this is literally translated, he created, namely God. Or to put it in the usual English language, God created. Because in English language, the noun comes before the verb. In Hebrew, the verb comes before the noun. God created. Atham can be translated as Adam, or it can be translated as man. Let me translate it as man. It can also be translated as Adam, especially in this sentence. God created man, or God created Adam from the ground. Notice the similarity between Athama and Atham. You have Aleph and you have Aleph. Thaleth, Thaleth. Mem, Mem. And you have the same vowels, Kames, Kames. Kames, or I should say, you have the same vowel here. You have Kames and Kames. The reason why you don't have Kames here is because the person who is reading is hurrying to emphasize the last syllable. And to facilitate this hurrying, then this vowel here has to be shortened to a composite schwa. This is hatef or katef pathak, which is a hurried pathak. So you don't stay long over the aleph, you hurry it to the last syllable. So it's athama. So what we have here is this. God created Adam, or God created man. Min is a preposition meaning from. This is makef, which means binding. This joins the preposition to the definite article and to the noun. God created Adam or man from the ground. So notice Adam is related to Adama. Adama was the substance used to create Adam. Adam was made from Adama, or the ground. Number 16, here's the verb ba, which means he came. Ham Melech is the king. Min is from, and ha hekal is the palace. I can know from this context what ha hekal would mean because I'm dealing with the king, and I'm dealing where the king is coming from. You know that the king lives in a place called a palace. Okay, so this is palace. If we had more information in the context, it could also be possible that the king came from the temple. If we knew from preceding sentences or sentences before or sentences after that the king had been in the temple praying, okay, or he was in the temple seeking God's answer to a question he had. But since we just have this, most likely the translation here should be palace. So the translation is the king came from the palace. Number 17, Amar Elohim El Ha'atham. Here is the verb Amar, which means he said. Elohim is the noun, which means God. El is a preposition that is onto. And here is makef, binding or joining onto to the definite article and to the noun. Translation is, God said unto the man. Number 18, we el ha'er ba ham melech. Where is and, el is the preposition unto. Ha'er is the city. And ba is the verb, and ha-melech is the noun and the definite article. Ba is he came, ha is the, and melech is king. So translating it, and unto the city came the king. Or you could say, and the king came unto the city. Number 19, bara Elohim, or min hakoshek. Now, again, another grammatical rule says that just as how we have pathak under the a of the definite article when it comes before a noun that begins with a, so if it comes before a noun that begins with keth, because keth is also coarse and rough, it does not need any compensation for a lack of dagesh forte by lengthening the pathak to a kames, so the pathak can stay as it is. Translation, God created light from the darkness. Okay, now let us get into the lesson itself. The exercise that we looked at last week was a continuation of the lesson at the end of last trimester, at the end of 2021. In which we looked at the definite article. Now we're looking at a new lesson itself called the inseparable prepositions. By inseparable, I mean a preposition that is attached to a noun and it is not separated from the noun. It is not like min in the previous exercise, in which you see that min, a preposition meaning from, is not attached to the definite article and to the noun, but it is joined by this horizontal line called makef, which is binding or binder, and it is not actually attached to the noun so that it becomes part of the noun. In the case, though, of these prepositions, lameth, which means to or for, beth, which means in, with, or by, or kaf, which means as or like, when these are joined to a noun, they are not separated from the noun. They become part of the noun itself and of the translation. So, le is to or for, be is in, with, or by, ke is as or like. Remember that when a consonant does not have a vowel underneath it, we put a simple schwa underneath that consonant. If it is a guttural consonant, we put a composite schwa underneath that guttural consonant. So we can call these prepositions le, that is the simple schwa, is underneath it, and it is pronounced like the e in because or au revoir. Le, to or for, be, in, with, or by, ke, as, or like. These prepositions have no existence as separate words, but like the definite article, they attach themselves as prefixes to the words they govern. Therefore, they are called inseparable prepositions. So they're not to be looked at as separate words from the nouns that they are joined to. Just like the definite article becomes a part of the noun because it is attached to the noun, so these inseparable prepositions join themselves to the noun that come after them, and so they are called inseparable prepositions, or prepositions that are not able to be separated from the noun. Now, here are some rules governing the use of inseparable prepositions. Number one, they are normally without a vowel under them. That's what I noticed first. Notice that there is no vowel under them. So that's how they are normally. They are normally without a vowel under them. Instead, they have a schwa, and I would say a simple schwa under them. For example, here is the noun itself, melech, which means a king. But when you put the inseparable preposition lameth to the noun melech, here is what we have. We have underneath the lameth the simple schwa, and so it is le melech. Now notice that I have put the simple schwa to the right of L, and it is not on the line with the vowels here of melech. Notice that they are above, the simple schwa is above the line, and it is to illustrate that this is not a vowel. It is like a vowel, but it's not a vowel, like segol, like segol. And so it's written above. So it's le melech, to a king. That's how you translate it into English. Le melech, to a king. Be melech, or be melech.
Sir?
Yes.
Should we not pronounce it as Limelech instead of Lemelech? because I believe we learned a lesson where for smooth pronunciation, instead of saying Lemelek, we say Limelek, something like this, if I remember well.
Okay, I think you're talking about quiescent letters or letters that become silent.
Oh,
And
yes.
when the letter becomes silent, the vowel underneath it disappears. So instead of pronouncing the letter and the vowel that was there originally, you go straight to the second consonant and pronounce the word. However, I'm not dealing here with the quiescent letters of certain nouns or
Yes.
certain verbs. So notice also that the simple schwa is pronounced like the E in because. Notice I say because so fast that you can hardly even hear the E in the word. Or to use the French language, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in my pronunciation, au revoir, A-U-R-E-V-O-I-R, au revoir. I say that so fast that you can hardly hear the E in au revoir. Well, the simple schwa is like that E, which you pronounce so fast that you can hardly even hear it. So it is le melek, to a king. Also, the next one, the preposition beth, you have be melek, and that means in a king. Ke melek, as a king. Okay, so that's how normally you would have no vowel under these inseparable prepositions. Now let us look at another example. I illustrated melek, which is a noun meaning a king. I'm now looking at another noun, atham, which is a noun meaning a man, or it could be translated as Adam. Le atham is to a man. Be atham is in a man. Ke atham is as a man. So notice how these inseparable prepositions join themselves to the noun so that they become part of the noun. Le melek, to a king. Be melek, in a king. Ke melek, as a king. Then atham, le atham, to a man. Be atham, in a man. Ke atham, as a man. So rule number one, they're normally without a vowel under them. Instead, they have a simple schwa under them, as we can see in these examples. They have a simple schwa under them. Rule number two, when the inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word whose first letter has a schwa, for example, Shemuel, which is Samuel in English, starts with a simple schwa. So there is a simple schwa here in the noun itself. Then since two schwas cannot stand together at the beginning of a word, which is a rule that we learned when we were studying the simple schwa, that two schwas cannot stand together at the beginning of a word. So we cannot have le Shemuel. This is not grammatically correct. It's a grammatical error to write it like this. So even though the inseparable preposition has its own simple schwa, and it is joined to Shemuel, which has its own simple schwa, it creates a grammatical conflict because two simple schwas or two composite schwas cannot be together side by side. Now, in order to solve this problem, the schwa under the prefix, that is under the lameth, becomes kirik or hirik, that is the short vowel I, E. So instead of having two simple schwas, one after the other, the first simple schwa, which is under the inseparable preposition, is lengthened from a simple schwa to the short vowel E, the short vowel E, which is a short I sound. So you have le Shemuel, le Shemuel. Now, I just want you to notice this in case there is any question. The second schwa remains vocal, that is, it is to be pronounced as it was before the preposition was attached. So it's not lish muel, as we might think from another grammatical rule that says that when you have a consonant and a vowel and another consonant, this is what you call a closed syllable, and that you do not pronounce a simple schwa under a closed syllable. That is another rule. But this is a rule that, does not follow that earlier rule. And that is that when you have that inseparable preposition with the simple schwa under it, the preposition loses the simple schwa, and the simple schwa is lengthened to a short I sound, A, and you hold on to the simple schwa, which is at the beginning of the noun. So you have le Shemuel, not lishmuel, but le Shemuel. So the second schwa remains vocal, that is, it is to be pronounced as it was before the preposition was attached. So here you have some examples of the preposition used with Shemuel. Shemuel is Samuel. Lish Shemuel to Samuel. Be Shemuel in Samuel. Ki Shemuel as Samuel. Okay, let us look also at the plural noun Melakim, which is the plural of Melech or king. Melakim means kings. Well, we have the same thing happening here when you have the simple schwa under lameth coming side by side with the simple schwa under the first syllable of Melakim. The simple schwa under lameth has to be lengthened to the short I sound, A, the short hirik or kirik. So you have le Melakim, to kings.
Sir,
Yes.
I think that's what I was talking about. That one here. The ison, the Eric.
Okay, tell me again what you were saying.
Yes, sir. I said, I believe that's what I wanted to talk about. The ison, where it changes when the two simple schwas, came together. So it changes now to the short I instead of E.
Okay, I see. I see. Well, that is correct. So that same principle applies in other nouns, like to kings, you have le Melakim. In kings, you have be Melakim. This is supposed to be a short hirik. The ink got away on the paper, so it looks, the dot looks bigger than what it should be. This is be Melakim in kings. This is ke Melakim as kings. So since two schwas cannot stand together at the beginning of a word, when you have a noun beginning with a simple schwa, then the simple schwa under the inseparable preposition, whether it is lameth or beth or kaf, is changed to the short hirik, which is the short is sound. Rule number 3. Okay, we're getting now to the quiescent letters that I was talking about a few minutes ago. A special case of 2, that is a special case of rule number 2, is when the inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word beginning with ye. Remember that yoth is one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet that under certain conditions becomes quiet so that it is not pronounced. And whatever vowel or whatever schwa might be under it also disappears. So here is a special case of number 2. We're looking at the noun Yehutha, which is Judah in English. Yehutha, Judah. To Judah is first Li Yehutha. That is the first step. After you have shortened the simple schwa on the lameth to short hirik, the second step is to note that the yod or the yod quiesces or becomes silent. This is Quiesces, quiesces. That is, it loses its consonantal character. That is the sound of that particular letter, and joins the preceding vowel, short kirik or hirik, to form the long kirik. You might be referring to that also. I'm not sure. The schwa falls off from the yoth. Let me illustrate with this example. For example, you have Li Yehutha to Judah. It becomes, well, what happens? The yoth becomes silent, so it's not pronounced. The simple schwa disappears, and the yoth and the short hirik join together to form the long vowel, the long hirik or kirik. So now instead of having Li Yehutha, this becomes Li Hutha to Judah. The same thing happens in Judah. You have Bi Hutha instead of Bi Yehutha. The yoth becomes silent. The simple schwa disappears, and the yoth and the short hirik join together to form the long hirik. So you have Bi Hutha. And as Judah is Ki Hutha, not Ki Yehutha, but Ki Hutha, because this quiesces or becomes silent, the simple schwa drops out. And so what is left is the yoth and the short hirik joining together to form the long I sound E. So you have Ki Hutha, Bi Hutha, Li Hutha to Judah, Bi Hutha in Judah, Ki Hutha as Judah. So this is a special case of number 2. Remember, number 2 says that 2 simple schwas cannot join together, cannot be together side by side. So the first simple schwa, which is under the preposition, is lengthened to a short kirik. And then this rule says, if you have a quiescent letter that starts a noun, then something else happens. The simple schwa will drop out, and what will be left is the yoth and the kirik under the preposition. And so it will no longer be Li Yehutha, it will no longer be Bi Yehutha, it will no longer be Ki Yehutha, it will now be Li Hutha, Bi Hutha, and Ki Hutha. Okay, now let us look at rule number 4. Another special case of rule number two, is when the inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word whose first letter is a guttural, which has a composite schwa, like the word ari. Notice there is a composite schwa consisting of pathak and the simple schwa. So it's called composite because it is made up of more than one element. It's not just one element, like one dot above the other, but it is one dot above the other plus the short pathak. And this is called hatef pathak or hurried pathak. Bear in mind also that guttural letters do not take simple schwas under them as a general rule. They generally take the composite schwa. So what are we going to do when we have the inseparable preposition having a simple schwa coming together with a noun that begins with a consonant followed by a composite schwa? The combination of le, ari is impossible since two schwas cannot stand together. It doesn't matter whether this is a simple schwa or that is a composite schwa. They are both schwas, and two schwas cannot stand together at the beginning of a word. So under the influence of the composite schwa, the inseparable preposition takes the corresponding short vowel. Let me explain that some more. These two can't stand together. The two schwas cannot be side by side. So in order to deal with the problem, what happens is that instead of having the simple schwa under the lameth takes the pathak or gets a pathak for itself and places it underneath it. So now you have, instead of two schwas together, you have la, lameth, and pathak. And of course, this composite schwa can remain. So here's what happens. The noun ari is a lion. But if you're going to say to a lion, you would have to write it like this, and speak it like this, la ari. Instead of le ari, you have to say la ari, because the inseparable preposition will take the short vowel that is in the composite schwa. Whatever is the short vowel, it will take it. Here is another example. Ba ari, pathak. Notice it has taken the same short pathak that is under aleph. Ba ari, in a lion. And the same thing happens here. You don't have ke ari, but ka ari. The kaf has taken the pathak that is part of the composite schwa under the guttural consonant aleph. Ka ari as a lion. Now notice something that happens with ethom or edom. When you have to edom, the same principle happens. The simple schwa is removed because two schwas cannot be together. The composite schwa remains, and instead of having a simple schwa under the inseparable preposition, it takes the same short vowel that is part of the composite schwa under the first guttural consonant of the noun. So you have le ethom to edom, be ethom in edom, and ke ethom as edom. So this is another special case of rule number 2. When you are joining an inseparable preposition to a noun that starts with a guttural letter. Rule number 5. An exception to 4 is the word Elohim, God. We're dealing now again, Brother Solin, with quiescent letters. An exception to number 4 is the word Elohim, God. The combination is first le Elohim, that is, the segol is borrowed from the composite shua, or another segol is placed there, just like the segol, which is part of the composite shua. And then what happens is the aleph in Elohim quiesces or becomes quiet and loses its consonantal character. That is, it's not pronounced. It becomes silent. And so what we have as Elohim, God, we have Le Lohim. So instead of having the segol, the short E sound is lengthened to sire, the long E sound. So this is changed because the composite shua drops out. The aleph is not pronounced. This is a quiescent letter, so everything connected with it disappears, leaving Le Lohim, but this has to be adjusted because of the silencing of aleph and the silencing of the composite shua. This short E, segol, has to be lengthened to long E, which is sire, which is an A sound, like the E in 8 or the E in wait. It has an A sound. So you have Lelohim to God, Belohim in God, Kelohim as God. Rule number 6, the divine name, that is the name of God, the personal name of God, is always written Yehovah in the Hebrew Bible, but it is read by the Hebrews by calling another name, which is a title that is used of God, which is Adonai or Adonai, which means Lord. That's why a lot of times God's name is translated in the Old Testament as Lord. It is coming from the practice of reading this as Adonai instead of as Yehovah. Now, Yehovah has the vowels of Adonai to prevent readers from calling the divine name. Yahweh or Yahweh is thought to be the correct pronunciation of God's personal name. But when the inseparable preposition is prefixed to the divine name, it should take the corresponding short vowel from the composite shua under Hatef Pathak in Adonai. Okay, so it is following the vowels of Adonai. And so under Aleph, you have Adonai. You have the composite shua, Hatef Pathak. So instead of having, instead of following these vowels, what is done is to follow the vowels of Adonai, which is read in place of Yahweh or Yahweh. So when you put the preposition Lameth before Yehovah, you give the noun, you give the preposition the Pathak, because the Pathak is the same as the Pathak that is part of the composite shua under Aleph. So Pathak comes here. This is not pronounced because it loses its pronunciation. And so what you have is the pronunciation of, actually it's going to be following Adonai. It's going to be Lathonai when you read it, which is to the Lord, Bathonai in the Lord, Kathonai as the Lord. It's not going to be read in the synagogues just as it is written. The reason it is written with the vowels of Adonai is to prevent people from pronouncing God's personal name. This is not how God's personal name is pronounced. So they will read it as Lathonai, following the vowels of Adonai, Bathonai, and Kathonai. Okay, now this is quite more than a mouthful to really understand in one lesson. And I think it is, I'm going to be continuing this lesson next week. Instead of giving you the test next week, this is, you need more time to go through this. So I'm starting at rule number 7 next week in looking at inseparable prepositions. I have rules 7 and 8 to go through. Then we will look at the rules governing min, which is another preposition that is from, but it is not an inseparable preposition. So I'm dealing with it separately from the inseparable prepositions le, be, and ke. So we look at rules governing min, and that will be the lesson. So I'm going to review briefly the inseparable prepositions at the beginning of next week's lesson and finish the lesson. The week after next week, I think you will be ready to do a test on this lesson. Okay,
Yes.
so we have seen that the rules governing inseparable prepositions, they're normally without a vowel under them. Instead, they have a schwa under them. Number 2, when the inseparable preposition is prefixed to a word whose first letter has a schwa, since two schwas cannot stand together, at the beginning of a word, the schwa under the prefix becomes a short hirik. And we have seen a special case of number 2, that when you have the inseparable preposition attached to a noun, and the first letter of that noun is a letter that becomes silent under certain conditions. Well, when it becomes silent, the simple schwa drops out, and let us say we are looking at Yehutha, the yoth or the yod of the first letter of that noun joins with the short hirik to form the long hirik, and thus we have a different pronunciation. You have another special case of when the inseparable preposition comes before a noun that has a composite schwa. The inseparable preposition takes the short vowel that is part of the composite schwa. And we looked at another exception to number 4, is the use of the word God, that when the aleph in Elohim becomes silent and the composite schwa drops out, we have to lengthen the segol under the inseparable preposition to its corresponding long vowel sire. And then we looked at the divine name and see that the inseparable preposition has to be given the vowel of the substitute name that is used for God's personal name, and that is Adonai, the vowels of Adonai. All right, so that is what we have covered, and we will start at Rule 7, governing inseparable prepositions next week.
Yes.
All right, this is more than a mouthful. I advise you to go ahead and go through the rules governing inseparable prepositions, and then we will continue from there next week at rule number 7. Any question before we close? All right. Now, next week, most likely I'm going to finish this lesson quickly since I've already covered most of it. I'm going to be going on to a review of lesson 19, on which will prepare you for the test in the following week. All right, so take care and have a good weekend.
Okay, sir. Thank
All
you.
right. Yes.